Westeros.
And welcome to our Morning Throners podcast.
I'm Nelson.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Kyle.
And we are your Morning Throners.
And welcome back to another episode of your favorite Song of Ice and Fire podcast. We are your Morning Throners with the Soiled Knight. Kyle, how you doing, man?
Not Davos.
Yeah, well, as I say, I was wrong, right? Yeah.
He was a Soiled Knight probably at one point in his life.
Yeah, I mean, this one's still kind of, it caught me off guard for sure in that sense. I mean, I guess you asked how I'm doing. I've been like sick off and on.
We
for,
don't
like, the last
talk about that.
month. Well, I just meant like in case my voice and shit's all goofy and I'm hacking. And
People care about us.
No one has ever commented that they care. We've talked about this a few
sometimes.
times. No one's ever said I
not true.
actually care how
I
you
can
guys
go
are doing.
back far enough to find a personal, comment. People
Well,
are talking trash
regardless.
to Nelson's Packers like they can't win a game.
That happens in our Discord sometimes.
They can't win a big game to save their life right now.
that's
But
just every season.
Finn just likes whatever team won this week. The dude's got like 20 teams. I'll call him out live on the podcast. I don't care.
Join the Discord if you want to be in on the trash talk.
That was just explaining why I might sound weird. But yeah, it was a pretty good chapter. I liked being, I like when we have characters that are, I mean, none of them were really together, but like, you know, we get kind of different points of view from the similar situations, right? Like, so like we had Ario or whatever, right? That's his name from the first one.
Ario Hota.
Yeah. So like, we kind of knew why, shit, I'm drawing a blank on his name now too. All these people have names that are brand new to me. Doran? Is Doran right?
Doran, yeah. Doran's the guy with gout.
Yeah, see, I'm not an idiot. But anyway, yeah, so like we kind of knew his plans and what was going on. Then we get the other end of that with like, oh, all the sand snakes are locked up, and that kind of stuff's fun to kind of get through.
Yeah, so good point. So I guess let me just real quick. So where we last left off in Dorne was, like Kyle's saying, we had the Area Hota chapter. We've only had one of those so far. Came from the Water Gardens to Sunspear, and that ended with Dorne saying, go lock up the sand snakes.
Lock them up.
And then in this chapter, the quick synopsis is basically just Aerys Oakheart, who's a Kingsguard, the one that's sent to be with Marcella. He goes and has this promiscuous meeting with Doran's daughter, Arianne Martell. So that's like
That's not allowed.
That's the synopsis of this one. So yeah, and in this one, like I was alluding to, we find out that the sand snakes have been locked up. So that did happen.
All of them.
Sorry, Kyle, keep going. Just trying to give a little continuity for the listeners who might not have read.
Yeah, and it sounded, I guess from the other side, it didn't sound likely that all of them would get locked up, but here they all are. I think, right? Like that was kind of how it was left. Was like, oh, this is going to be a tall task.
Doran was like, do you really think you'll be able to do it? And
Yeah.
I think Ario was like, I just need eight men or something like that. And
Arrow's a badass dude.
Oh, so it was Area that did it. Then okay, yeah. I guess that kind of is you know, character building for him as well, right? Like that's if I would have forgotten that part because they didn't mention
Even this knight's like, goddamn, if I got to fight this guy.
Yeah,
exactly. This guy that thinks he's pretty hot shit, Ares.
So Kyle liked it, enjoyed it.
Yeah, sorry, I cut you off. Did you have anything else to say in the chapter overall?
Of course, you cut him off. What's new?
I was giving our viewers who might not have read along.
I honestly don't. I don't know where I was going with any of that. I think we'll get to it.
Probably had
the rest
path,
of it.
but then Nelson cut you off.
No. I was kind of fizzling out because I didn't want to.
Jeff's pissed at me today for some reason. I don't even know why. We just got here.
It's Packers week.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Eagles Packers.
Yeah.
This will come out the Monday after the game too.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, there'll be an outcome. There'll be
the Packers don't have a quarterback, right? I saw they both hurt their throwing
fine.
hands or something like that. Yeah.
He's fine. He was going to come back in the fourth quarter, but they didn't.
Anyway, what I was going to say is, I was kind of winding it down because we're going to get to the specifics throughout this. So I think I got a good
cool.
overview.
The meat and potatoes of it all. Yeah. All right, so we come in hot with Aerys Oakheart, which obviously we don't know that right from the jump.
We come in not hot at all. Nothing is happening. What do you mean?
Super hot. Super hot in the Shadow City. We're in disguise. Listen.
And the first thing he says is it's chilly. Like this is the opposite of coming in.
We're
hot.
coming in. He's in disguise. We're in the Shadow City. That sounds legit. And he's like, shit, I don't even belong here. Like we learn about the like feuds. Like he's like enemy number one. It'd be like a Packers fan walking into Lincoln Financial Field.
Walking through Philadelphia region this week.
That.
Exactly.
And that's what he's doing. So that's pretty hot to me, if you're asking.
That's true. He's in a dangerous area. He's in the Viper's nest, you could say.
So we've kind of known that the Reach people, right, they're separated by the mountains, but we've kind of had some history on some feuds, right, some old wars.
Yep.
I think Doran's chapter might have talked about some of the wars, right? At least.
Well, and I think the main reason we know there's tension here is because the Tyrells were in King's Landing. When the Dornish were coming to King's Landing, Tyrion was like, fuck, this is not going to be good. The Tyrells and Martells hate each other because the Reach and Dorne are bordering. Kind of to Jeff's point, that they just have border wars just because before the Targaryens came, these were all just different kingdoms, so you kind of just don't get along with your neighbors. But also, once the Targaryens came, Dorne didn't come into the realm right away. Right, so wars with Dorne were frequent in way more recent memory, right? Like 150 years ago.
Where was Dorne? Do I need to know that?
Dorne's all the way at the.
Well,
I don't know what I mean. Why didn't they? They didn't come into the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah, Aegon showed up. 6 people joined. Dorne kept warring. So the reason like the North might not be as aggressive with like the Riverlands, even though they're neighbors, is because they haven't been warring for 300 years. Dorne was warring 120 years ago because they still weren't in the realm or whatever.
Do we know why Aegon just didn't take a dragon down there and Harrenhal them?
Yeah, but we have enough history to get into. We'll talk about that another day.
Okay. So he mentions how Dorne is angry with Oberyn's death and actually less now that the Sand Snakes are locked up in towers.
It's just back in the shadows, right? I mean, not to talk about the shadows in the Shadow City, but it's kind of pushed these. There's still mumblings and rumblings going on, but
they're not parading around.
Yeah, it's not quite as loud and vocal as it was when the Sand Snakes were out there, calling for heads.
Yeah, it's like the thing where it's like once it's out of the media for like a week and a half, like everybody kind of forgets about it. The Sand Snakes were keeping it in the media. The whole Oberyn is dead and we hate everybody. So now locking them up, people are kind of forgetting about it now. Just
so
no
it's less like let's go to war tomorrow versus like damn, fuck that dude who didn't go to war.
I think it's a little the other way in that it's like, oh shit, like this could get us in trouble for kind of saying these things, right?
Yeah,
like,
we could get locked up too.
Yeah, so you kind of have to you kind of have to pull back your public face of that is part of that as well, I would say.
Yeah, fear for that reason.
But I think you're right. The fervor isn't there as much.
Yeah.
The one quick thing I want to mention is Aerys, kind of like we were saying, Reach, their enemies. He says later Tyrion's one that sent him, which we kind of knew Tyrion was the hand at the time of all this happening. But why would he send Tyrion, not Boros or Meryn?
Maybe because he trusted him.
Because he's able.
He was an able guy to protect Myrcella. He maybe didn't have like, I don't know, maybe he wanted to keep the people that were like on Cersei's payroll closer to him.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense. It just, it just kind of sounds like if there was like a Stark Kingsguard and you had to send somebody to like watch over somebody at Castle Rock, and you send that, you know what I mean? Just like you're sending the enemy. Not that Starks and Lannisters are natural enemies, but maybe
it was an FU to this guy too. It's like, haha, go be around the people that you've hated your whole life type of thing.
And I don't know if there's a serious answer to it. It was kind of just a.
Maybe Aerys doesn't even really hate these people because he's kind of young to the feuds of it all. He just kind of knows the history.
I mean,
but
kind of obviously doesn't, right?
What do you mean? Well, he doesn't hate one of them.
It didn't stop him from.
Yeah. Well, he's not he's not like racist or like culturist against them for sure. Yeah, he's getting with Arianne. Well, I wanted to mention some famous Oakhearts because he's like he remembers some like tapestries from back home, and he remembers Lord Edgren Oakhart, the open-handed, seated with hundreds of Dornish heads piled at his feet. The three leaves in the Prince's Pass, pierced by Dornish spears. Alistair Oakhart sounding his war horn with his last breath. All of our Oakhart, the green oak, all in white, dying by the side of the young dragon.
Okay.
Young dragon's Daeron the First, the one who conquered Dorne.
The one we've been reading about books about and stuff like that.
Yeah,
right?
well, the one that we were reading, the book that he wrote about himself, about how he conquered Dorne.
Conquest.
But after he conquered Dorne, they immediately unconquered themselves, and then they kind of were conquered via marriage later. He actually tried to conquer them, and did, but not for long. But yeah,
I know. I just was kind of bringing up where we had heard his name.
Lots of history in this one. I get excited about it. So
the history's kind of cool in this one. There's a little bit that I obviously know about now, and maybe got
a little spoilery for you. I was thinking
a little spoilery. But it's cool to like at least hear these names.
Yeah, we'll get into that. So where were we? Oberyn stuff.
He's not wearing his white. I kind of mentioned in the beginning. He's in disguise. He's wearing, Dornish clothes.
Yeah,
like a silk top or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Kind of reminds me of like
hood,
like Aladdin-ish. Kind of we get
desert garb.
Aladdin vibes.
Yeah,
right?
desert garb. Yeah, sure.
Desert garb, but like even like how he's like creeping around, like Aladdin had to. Stealing bread and stuff.
He said like it's just evening time, and because it's so hot here, no one's actually out during the daytime because it's so fucking hot. But now it's like starting to come alive a little bit. Like at one point, like a whore leans out a window and it's like, "What's up there, big fella?" And he gets aroused. So this guy's just first off, he's just a horny guy. Right, he's a horny guy. He's been in the Kingsguard for a while, so that fuels that fire probably, right?
It probably does for sure. I don't know. Like he didn't say. I don't know. Maybe he did. Like he wasn't like so aroused that he had to like run into the house and put some money down, right? Like, hey, there's a good looking girl hanging out the window. I don't know, but
well, he says to himself, he says, "We men are so weak, our bodies betray even the noblest of us." And essentially, he's like, "Man, curse you, penis! I swore an oath to the Kingsguard.
Exactly.
You know, like I can't be doing this." And so you're right, Jeff. He didn't run in there, but
yeah. And along those lines, there's a part where he thinks to himself, "The singers say love can make a fool of any man," which reminds me of the Florian thing. I feel like the thing that we hear about the Florian and Jonquil story is every man is a knight, every man can be a fool type thing. But also what Aemon told Jon in Jon 8, The Game of Thrones, Aemon says, love is the bane of honor, the death of duty, which is basically, he's explaining why the Night's Watch take these vows. And it's like, so we don't love anybody, because loving someone, right? Like then what happens if Arianne shows up and wants to kill Marcella tomorrow? Right, then Ares has a big problem, right? So that's the most direct show of this conflict. But I think that's the whole theme of the chapter, right?
Yeah, you could be compromised if you have loved ones and family, right? Like that's kind of the idea by that. And I mean, they even saw it with Jon and what's her name? Shit,
Ygritte.
I forget her name. Ygritte. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like he didn't know what to do. Nobody knew what was going on. Like,
well, how about the angle that there's, it's the forbidden fruit now, which makes it more tempting too, right?
Exactly.
Which you kind of hit on. Like, what if, can a knight have a family and still be a good knight? Is, I guess, the question.
You know who have figured this out?
It sounds like the one guy did who nobody knew about.
Who are the ones with? That's not what I mean. Who are Dany's guards? She got an ass for the Unsullied. They figured this out. They took the vow, but they also just took it physically. So they were slaves.
I don't know
they didn't have a choice, but they can't break the vow, right? Because they don't have the parts.
What do Mormons do when they're kids? They just like kind of grind dry.
Soaking. Oh yeah. Right? Isn't that soaking? I heard that.
And jump pumping. Yeah.
Wasn't that a big thing at that Mormon college? Yeah, I've heard that.
Brigham Young.
If we have any Mormon listeners, let us know.
Soaking and jump pumping. It's so weird.
Okay.
Oh yeah, jump pumping. That's when is that when you soak and then you have a buddy jump on the bed?
Yeah, it's so stupid.
I literally saw a video today on like YouTube Shorts or Instagram or something where it was like a bed in China that was to help like I guess old people, and it was like a bed that kind of jump. It simulates a friend jumping for you.
How did you see that? I don't know. All right, so he's walking through the alleys. You said temptation music's all around him now that it's cooler and dark out. Marcella has quickly learned to enjoy Dorne and all of its things and like the culture and the prince.
Yeah, like she's a little kid, right? Like, I mean, she's not like biased to these people at all. Like, she didn't fucking know. Like, she's just here and there's other kids here and she's having fun. They're playing these fucking fun games and like.
You were kind of arguing this last chapter that kids don't recognize no, this isn't a class difference. This is more of like a race. We don't like each other culture difference, but it's not. I keep saying race. I don't even know if like Dornish or you would call them a different race.
I know what you're saying.
And it's almost like Marcella's just too young to even know about that. Yeah, so
cultural difference, I think, is it for sure, right? Not race.
And I don't know if that's actually true. If she is too young, or if she's just a little bit more like I don't really give a fuck. Like whatever, this is my lot, and I'm gonna make the best of it. They talk highly of her later. Like she's kind of like grown up, witty, smart. The one thing I want to say before we get on to Marcella is he thinks the one way I can tame my lust is the way King Baelor did, which is just fast until I faint. Then I can't be fucking anybody if I'm literally just too weak from starvation to do anything.
Yeah. So back on Marcella, I think it's just, you've been here. Cersei's probably kept you pretty tight, locked up, into the castle, whatnot. And now you're in this land, which I think that there's parts of the Dornish culture that I think sounds pretty fun. Like they're kind of like a YOLO type of society, right? Like they want to enjoy their temptations, to throw it out there in all ways. They want to drink, they want to dance, they want to
spicy food, wanton women,
good food, seasoned up. Yeah, like they're living their life, man.
Yeah, I don't know if the food has something to do with it, but they're definitely more progressive, right? That's what all the fans always say. Is they're a more progressive society with the whole, especially I think mainly pointing to the whole women inheritance thing.
Yeah, I mean, especially the way Arianne talks later on, about just her views on her life and what's important, So
he did say he left her playing Syvas with Prince Tristane, and even though she's younger, she kind of wins more. I was wondering if Kyle liked this. Kyle's a big board. I was wondering what Kyle thought about it.
Is it though?
Because just close, not quite right. It's close. I think they say it's a combination of 3 games. I want to see what Kyle's a big board game guy, so I want to see what we hear a little bit more about this in other chapters, but I want to see what you thought from the
I was going to say, I don't know that I know the games that it's part of yet. It sounds like kind of like a chess kind of situation as well.
Kind of like chess, but you definitely get to set up pieces like Stratego.
Yeah.
The thing that I realized in this chapter for the first time is he says like, oh, it's played on
moving tiles.
No, 3. He names 3 different colored tiles. I forget what it is, but it's like green, red, and blue. So Stratego, Jeff, I don't think has... maybe it does. It has rocks in Stratego. Is there water? Maybe there's rocks and water in Stratego. It's been a while. Stratego's a great game.
It's been a while since I played Stratego too, and I don't know why, because it's a dope game.
But yeah, it is a great game. I think the answer is it's a combination of like a Risk type game. I think there's a different one, but I think it's like very Risk-like. Stratego and chess are the 3 that it's said to be. And no one ever made an official one because I think George didn't want it to be officially made because he thought that would take some of the coolness of had like official rules that you could actually play yourself. But I think fans have made a version you can 3D print.
Yeah. So yeah, she's playing with Tristane. Her and Tristane, very different looking. Kind of like blonde Snow White, and Tristane is olive of skin, like light and dark almost. But
dark hair, brown eyes. Kind of like Cersei and Robert. And he's like, I hope this ends up better than that did, because Cersei did not like him.
Yeah, it was a rough one to be around.
He's like, I didn't leave her alone. She's got guards and septas with her, so.
Yeah.
She wasn't going to like anybody that wasn't Jaime, though, so it's not Robert's fault necessarily.
Yeah. I think that's pretty fair. I think she might have given her... How about the other thing is, like, she had mentioned, I think at one point, that, like, she was actually, like, excited to marry Rhaegar, if that was going to happen.
I don't know if we heard about
I think we did talk about that, actually.
That was in a chapter, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, she's well protected.
Septa Eglantine and Tristane had his sworn shield, Sir Gascoigne of the Green Blood. I got to get all the names in, especially the new ones. So, then he thinks back to a meeting he had with Doran. So we didn't see this, but this is probably maybe the day after or 2 days after the area Hotah chapter where Doran had showed up. At some point, it also sounds like it's relatively recent to this, which makes me think this chapter is probably only a week or so from the last.
I think it's all pretty relative to the last Doran chapter.
Yeah, I think it's pretty within a week probably.
And they've been down there for half a year or so. That Ariane's been hosting them. I would say timeline doesn't matter.
You have to give me a minute to look that one up. I don't know. About 6 months.
I'm just all over it today.
Good guess, sir.
Yeah, so pretty dangerous outside of Sunspear. Half of the people calling for war is like the biggest thing that I have, and just not on Doran's side of it all. He's like, I ain't fucking joining no wars that I can't win.
Yeah, so I have notes on the meeting with Doran. Basically, he's like, I hope Ariane paid you welcome. And Aries was like, I hope he wasn't blushing.
Was that the first hint to Kyle? Like,
yeah, I mean, I knew right away, right? Okay. Like once he met up with her and doesn't say her name or anything, I knew where he was going.
Okay, because he said in the beginning, I fell in love with her. He didn't say who, and then he blushes to Ariane.
Great question. I wanted to ask Kyle this earlier. I forgot. What you're alluding to is, Kyle, like, what did you like? How long did it take you, I guess, to figure out it was Ares? They say it pretty quickly it's Ares, but how long to figure out that he's going to Doran's daughter, Ariane? Because I think we've only even heard Ariane's name once or twice. So even if you heard Ariane, I don't know if you would have known exactly who that is, right? So
I don't know. I'm trying to think of when.
I would think it would even be like pretty decently into the sex to.
No, I figured it out before that for sure.
Did you figure it out, or did you assume that was like your guess?
I mean, it seemed pretty like likely.
I think the blushing one is a big clue. Yeah, up to that point, you're like, oh shit, who's he talking about? I
would think so too.
I guess my point was like, who else could it have been, right? Like
Sand Snake, anybody really in Doran. I mean, it could have been a new character.
But he's like, I got to go see her. To me, it seemed like, okay, this is going to be the daughter of Doran, is what it felt like, you know?
Yeah. And again, if you got to this point, I think the blushing at her name is a big hint to it.
Yeah, for sure.
But I definitely probably reading it was like, all right, who's it fuck's he going to see? Like, I had no clue.
Yeah. But also, I don't think Does Ariane even exist in the show?
Eris Oakheart doesn't exist in the show.
I think he does, but he
probably does, but
this chapter is definitely not in the show at all.
Yeah.
I don't know if Ariane even exists.
We only meet the Sand Snakes, I think.
I don't think she does, but
yeah. All right.
So that tells Kyle how different the show is
I mean,
at this point. But.
To be fair, this is literally, I just kind of skimmed the first 4 pages or whatever there. This is the second kind of mention of the meeting with this or like him being in love with somebody. And so like I think right here it was a kind of a big, like you said, a big hint.
Yeah, the blushing
like,
is a hint to it is.
Well, he's like, I trust my daughter made you welcome. And like, he's like, oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, little schoolboy.
Yeah.
I used to be I probably still am. I don't catch myself in situations where I have to blush as much, but I would blush hard.
How do you know if you blush?
You can just feel it. Oh, you mean your cheeks are on fire when you're blushing.
Huh. I don't know if I know what that is. Do I blush? Have you ever noticed me blushing?
I don't know.
I feel like I embarrass myself all the time.
Do you get in like awkward situations where it's like, oh my gosh, and then like cheeks, man, they throw you under the bus. But
that's what I was just saying. Nelson doesn't know embarrassment actually because it's just like his constant state, so it doesn't affect him like that.
I just own everything so much, not a care in the world.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's the way to live. So they kind of talk about the dangers of where they're at, Sunspear, the Shadow City, why they have to, we're getting into why we have to move to the Water Gardens, right? And Eris is kind of shocked that they would even think about attacking Marcella.
Well, yeah, so Doran says, my mother taught me not to start a fight I can't win, and the peace we have right now is as fragile as your little princess. Basically saying, like, everything is riding on Marcella right now.
I mean, this dude's so paranoid, though, in, like, from our last meeting with him and everything, right? Like, that's like, he's like, I'm hiding away. People can't see me like this. Like, I don't ever leave. I'm always here, that kind of stuff. So, I don't know how much to read into that, I guess. Like, is it really that dangerous? Do people really want her dead?
Is it a threat?
You mean Doran threatening Ares?
Doran threatening Ares, yeah, when he's like, no. The piece is as fragile as your little princess.
I didn't take it as a threat.
Because Ares' response is only a beast would harm a little girl, which almost seems like a response as if he took it kind of...
I mean, I just think it's showing the kind of, what's the word? Like being stupid and young. Innocence.
Naivety.
Naivety of Ares of like...
Naivete.
They just smashed in the brain of a little girl. So
exactly.
Ago.
That's Doran's reply. He's like, Ares says only a monster would hurt a child, and Doran's like, remember Elia Martell, my sister? Yeah, she had a little girl too, and she was a princess.
Remember what happened to Rhaenys?
Yeah,
so we kind of owe you guys one, is what he's saying, right?
Yeah, and at that point, maybe it's a little thready. Like, you killed one of ours. Like, we got one of yours right here. Like,
I still don't get that from Doran,
then he says anyone who would kill Marcella wouldn't be killing Marcella because they have any ill will towards Marcella. And this is where the threat kind of gets lifted. He says they'd be killing Marcella because then they'd be forcing my hand. If Marcella dies, then I have to go to war. I'm able to kind of keep this peace as long as Marcella's chilling. Yeah, is kind of what he's saying. Yeah.
And Eric's like, whatever, dude. I'm protecting this girl. Like,
I got this shit.
I got her.
There's also a line in there when he talking about the Elia's daughter. He says, anyone who would kill would have no more ill will for her than Amory Lorch did for Rhaenys, who was Elia's daughter. He's like, if he did indeed kill her. Like, suspicious that Amory Lorch killed her.
It might have been.
I think when Tywin and Tyrion were alone in confidence, Tywin told Tyrion that Amory did kill her and that Gregor raped and killed Elia and then the baby boy. So does that mean that Tywin's being honest with Tyrion? No, Tywin probably lied to Tyrion all the time. But I think we can probably take him for his word at that one. It seems like Amory Lorch did have something to do with it. So, but it's just funny that Doran is like, even if that's true, what they're fucking telling us, because they don't know what actually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, how do you believe Tywin, right? Like he kind of had been feeding everybody these lines, and I don't know. He seemed like he just kind of was a master manipulator, and like would tell people what he needed to tell them, right? Like,
whatever he needed to get them to do what he wanted to do.
Yeah, like, you can't take my best guy, so fucking, it was Amory Lorch. Yeah. You're not taking the mountain from me. Fuck this other guy that I can replace. Yeah.
And, like, I'm not putting it past Tywin to just lie to Tyrion, because, why not? He's like, you don't need to know the truth, so I'm going to keep the lie up with you. Why would I tell anybody? Yeah, so.
Yeah, so a little bit more world building. He talks about, we got to move to the Water Garden. It's safe out there, and it's great for the kids. Like, she's going to have a blast. and Shadow City's just got too many new travelers each day that dangers could be lurking around us all the time.
Kind of off topic again. Why do you guys think it's called the Shadow City? There might be a real reason. I don't know. Shadow, and I think it seems like they refer to it to basically all the surrounding city to the inner castle.
It's like in the shadow of the castle, right? Like exactly. It's this. I don't want to say it's the suburbs, but it's kind of like the city that grew out of like people coming to the castle or coming to this place. And like, go ahead, Joe.
I would say my guess is probably because they don't do shit in the daytime, that they're doing it when the shadows start to appear, and
that's a great idea. I didn't even think about that. I was more along the lines of Kyle, because
I think it's probably
it could be
both. But
for the one, so just to add to what Kyle said, this castle, do you guys remember what it is? What it looks like? Sun Spear.
It's bronze, isn't it?
There's the Tower of the Sun, which is a tall. I almost take it as like a Washington Monument looking, very tall, pointy type tower. Then you have like the Dome of the Sun, I think, which is like a bit where Doran meets, and it's got like this colored glass and stuff. But I almost think of the city as like a sundial, because I think the other thing we hear about the city is like it's got a couple walls. So like there's only one place where you can like actually enter all three walls in consecutive gates. Normally you have to like go in and then like walk half a mile around to the next gate to get in like layers. So I would think if you're looking at the city from like way out, it looks like a sundial, where the giant point is like, and then so you kind of get the shadow sweeping across. I don't know exactly how a sundial works, but you get the shadow sweeping.
I mean, you need like a wall, not a point. But
no, you just need a point.
Point would work.
You need a point to get a straight shadow, and you just track where the shadow moves over time.
You need the minutes too. You need the minute hand. Don't you?
A sundial? I don't think so. I think it's just one
point.
Dude,
a sundial comes off from the point, although it's not just a point up. It's like a wall out to 12 o'clock, and then it swings around.
I'm not going to pretend I've seen a sundial in the last 10, 15 years.
That's how I'm envisioning it. Nelson probably has one.
I see what Jeff's talking about, but I don't know if you need that. I just think it's...
Well, you need that angle. That's what creates the minute hand.
I didn't know there was minutes involved in that. I thought maybe there is.
You know how if it was just a point, like you wouldn't get at least to the hour, right? Maybe it's not the minutes, but like it's starting to be like between 2 and 3. You could say it's 2:30.
I feel like a single point would give you more precision. A straight up line would give you the most precision.
No. Just think about how the sun travels. Like it's gonna be like
a line would like move
a straight down. There's not gonna be a line. It's gonna be like kind of for the most part of high noon. Like
the sun doesn't go straight overhead.
I understand that, but I think you need the angle.
I don't know. I don't think either of us know enough.
We'll watch the video on it. All right. The last piece of information I have from this conversation is like, yo, Eris, don't tell King's Landing like we don't want word to get out about the movement.
Suspicious as fuck.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
I mean, this dude is like we saw him at before, right? Like he's definitely on edge all the time.
There's a reason to not let it. You don't want it to like fall in the hands of someone that's actually trying to kill Marcella.
Well, it's like they tried to hide Tommen up north, right? Like, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. Like I know what you're saying. I guess that kind of makes it even more suspicious than I just kind of proved the other way.
Well, it just like Doran's claiming here, hey, I'm trying to hide him from our own people, but don't tell King's Landing.
Her.
We're trying to hide her from. Yeah, I do that all the time. I do that when I'm listening to edit. I had just used the wrong name 50% of the time.
A lot of the time.
Yeah. You said something earlier about, you said, he sent Tyrion down south, and it was Tyrion sent Aerys.
Normally you could tell who it is, but it really bugs me when I'm listening to it. And I'm like, I'm not going to go in and re-record a name and try and like, it's like, but normally you can tell through context.
We just let you sound like an idiot.
I like when Jeff, normally you do just whisper the real name like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I edit it in so you hear it right afterwards, even if I didn't hear it in the live edit. But
yeah.
So keep doing.
I just stopped calling you out because it was like too constant.
That's why I whisper it.
You don't have to call me out, but yeah, just like say it so that it's in the edit.
I'll keep doing what I do. Anything else on this? Keeping it a secret.
Well, I was going to say that I mean, the Water Gardens does seem kind of like a resort, right? Like
sounds dope. Sounds like a Sandals.
It would be nice if it had a train or something, and it wasn't like literally the farthest place from everything. It's
a day's ride. It only took a day because Doran is in gout and had to ride this bumpy cart. It's a
day's ride from Sunspear, which is
Sunspear's
like
as far as
1,000 miles from fucking the next nearest town.
Well, that's a good and a bad thing depending on how you look at it. It's across a desert, so it's really hard to get there by land, I would think.
If you were coming from King's Landing, you're saying?
Anywhere. If you're coming from anywhere that's not Sunspear of the Water Gardens.
Yeah. All right. So he continues on his path to the hidden room, and bam, right into it. The girls ready for him. No playing around. I don't have the details on them getting there.
I skipped over the sexy stuff.
A lot of nipple play.
The one history thing before we get there is Prince Marion Martell had built the Water Gardens. Marin had built the Water Gardens as a gift for his Targaryen bride to mark Doran's marriage into the Iron Throne. So this is kind of when they actually started coming into the fold. Interesting. Daughter's name was Daenerys Targaryen.
Ooh, that is interesting.
She was a daughter of Aegon IV.
So Dany's the second.
We'll talk about it a little bit later.
Second of her name.
She's probably like the 17th.
You only get the second if you rule.
Okay. That's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, the Targaryens use a lot of names over and over.
There's probably a lot of Henrys in France. Was it France?
Yeah, Henry the 13th, right? Yeah, there's at least 13.
All right, so I don't have a whole lot of. He comes to this room.
So just to close out the Doran thing, before I know you're trying to. Jeff's anxious. We are going way too long on this, but the end of the Doran thing, like we already said it. Doran basically says, "You're coming with me to the Water Gardens. Don't send letters to King's Landing." Aerys basically says, "Okay, yeah, I have to say yes, even though I don't really want to say yes because even though I'm a King's Guard and I'm a badass, I still am only one man." Doran had kind of hinted at earlier. It's like, you can't really stop us. Like, what are you really gonna do? So he's like, "Okay, my hands are tied. I got to do it." So,
all right,
yeah.
Let's get to the room. We get into the room. I don't know. Do you want to build the room out? Does it really matter?
Well, it doesn't at first because Aerys doesn't even pay any attention to it, right? He just goes in and then it's naked lady time.
She's playing hide and seek. It's completely. I guess there's a dim candle, but yeah, she's like behind the door and she pops out naked.
George very clearly describes his type.
Yeah, so I was saying this. I think I was saying this to Jeff in the spoiler section of the last one. That I think in the last chapter I said Taina is the hottest girl, and I would date Taina. Ariane's probably up there too.
Yeah, the moment you said that, then the next chapter we get how great looking Ariane is. So
a lot of people, to give George the benefit of the doubt here, say the only reason she gets described so much and her nipples and like we get into so much detail is because we're trying to be like in the mind of Aerys, who is like
mid diddle,
but also like Kyle said, he hasn't had any. He's in the White Cloak, so he's been out of this game for a while and like kind of just almost in the honeymoon phase right now. So.
Yeah, so I don't have the details on this. Tell me where you want to come in at after the diddle.
So pretty much he's just battling with himself the entire time that they're like, because he came to tell her like this has to stop, and then they start doing. Yeah, it starts, and then like he's like battling with himself, like who am I? Like how can I be what I want to be and still do this shit? Right? Like that's kind of like his whole experience with her.
So one thing I was thinking about this, about the actual sexy times, is this feels like a parallel to Tyrion, right? There was definitely a Tyrion chapter where he's going to Shay to say, "Hey, Shay, no more of this." And so we didn't say this either. This is why, before he got here, he's thought about this at some point. He's like, "I'm going there to end this, to say like, this is the last. This can happen." And he shows up, and they immediately start doing it. I think this is similar to Tyrion. And she had like pet names, like Shay would have pet names for Tyrion, right? Like, oh, my lion or whatever. And here she's like, my white knight. So I think there are definite parallels there where they go to end it, they can't. Also, I think there's some parallels. I mean, I guess Kyle, let me think of like, what do you think about Ariane in general? So feel free to talk about anything from here to the rest of the chapter. What do you think? Like, is she in love with Aerys?
Dinner plate nipples.
Bad NPR.
Big old nipples.
Is she? I don't think so, man. Yes and no. I don't know. This is something I struggled with, and I'm obviously still struggling with while I was reading. It was just kind of, she's definitely using him, right? Like she definitely kind of pulls some strings by what the situation. Like she uses the situation to her advantage at the very least.
And she knows what God gave her, and she's not afraid to use it.
Yeah, so I mean, is she Cersei of the South kind of then? Because like I feel like she was doing that a little bit, at least with like some of the dudes around town that she needed to help her, like the Kettle Blacks and stuff. So
I think it's really interesting. Like, what if we would have had this chapter from her perspective? Right? Like, I feel like it's a totally different chapter, right? Because then we would know all that stuff.
It could be. It depends on if she's really in love, or it depends on if she's using him. Or maybe there's a middle road. Maybe it's a little bit of...
We're like, hey, I like this guy. He's a nice guy, but he also is the key to what I want.
We're having a lot of fun. We're having a lot of fun together, but hey, we need to get this plan moving.
It seems a little too perfect that like who else could really do like her plan. It seems like she wants from the get-go is let's crown Marcella, right? Who is the only person that can really help her do that? That only guy that can help me do this just happened. We just happened to fall in love. Like it was like.
Well, here's the other way. They could have just overpowered him. They could have just overpowered him with a bunch of her knights or guards, right? And just taken Marcella captive and crowned her.
It's different though.
That's different than just crowning her. Yeah, for sure.
It's different than having him on her side.
I'm just saying a different avenue. I'm also saying that maybe, it's been 6 months, so like they've been chilling for a little bit. Maybe tensions weren't as high to like war, but who knows? I don't know the details.
Well, because Oberon wasn't dead for the whole 6 months is part of that.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
they might have had a relationship, and then it's like, oh shit, this happened. All right, now we need to do something. He can help us this way. So it's like, all right, you've been dating him. Like now it's time to put the cherry on top.
And I think it's a really valid point. My question is, and I think kind of what Jeff was alluding to is, hey, Ares is like kind of a highborn. He showed up and he would be around the same places that Ariane is. So like it makes sense that they could just like, hey, they could have hit it off and that's how this happened. My question is to Kyle, and I don't think we have an answer. So I guess to Jeff too is he seems such a perfect key to the lock that she needs opened. That is it out of the realm of possibility that like even before he showed up, like she says, like me and Tyene both had the same plan, and Oberyn was going to do it too. Like, could they have been whispering like, hey, whatever night they send, try and make sure you're sitting next to him at the feast, or you know what I mean? Like, could this have been? And that's not to say that she didn't grow feelings or whatever, but yeah. So sorry, Kyle. I could tell you were going to say something.
No, all I was going to say is like he's also kind of. This was more on the side of like the love and the actual relationship and maybe the dual purpose kind of thing versus just the singular plan. But like he's also like an exotic kind of person in a way, right? Like he's an outsider, and so like, and he's powerful, and I mean he's probably a big dude, like he's a knight, like he's
a good looking guy. He's described as a good looking guy,
and he's important, and like I mean like I don't know, it's not like he's a nobody, and
it could have been different,
like has no place with her, like I think it could be a natural thing as well, right? Like I mean they're around each other a bunch, and you're
saying because he's like from the Reach and he's kind of like the forbidden fruit.
Well, I didn't even mean that. I just meant because he's not from Dorne, right? Like, okay. I mean, he's still just like somebody that's new in town, and like
he's not like a sloppy old man.
You don't see him all the time. Yeah,
good eye candy himself.
So to that point, the other thing that this kind of mirrors to me, gives parallel, is this feels a lot like Asha, right? The whole, and I never realized how many like a lot of people don't like Feast for Crows. I think one of the things that I'm realizing already is George. There's so many like parallels with like.
Tell me how this is an Asha parallel, because I'm not.
Asha was just talking to Tris for Botley, and like we don't know where that's going or what's happening there, but basically he's like, "I love you, I love you, I love you," and she's like, "No, I'm your queen. Like this is what we're gonna do." And that's not exactly what's happening.
I don't think that's a parallel. I think that's perpendicular.
It's a similarity where we have these female like people in charge that have power over male. Same thing with Cersei. We have Cersei kind of like in charge of Jaime, and there's this. I feel like this book especially has this like female power theme that
I won't deny that.
We've talked about that in like 10 episodes already out of 12 chapters.
Yeah, I don't think all those courses are going parallel to each other. I do agree that we do now have 3 examples of ladies in power, maybe a 4th if you get a Marcella POV down the road. Like
exactly,
girls.
You don't even need the POV just for it to be happening.
Yeah. So all right, let's get going because there's chapter to be had.
There
here.
is, yes.
The meat of it is still going, and we're a long ways in. So all right, they get done diddling. He's got a lot of shame for kind of breaking his vows, but he loves her a lot. And a lot of this time in the conversation, she's continuously teasing him about, I can share you, like, you like my cousins too. Like, oh, you love Marcella. Like, there's a little bit of jealous play there too.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of like, don't you love me, right? Is kind of what it is. But it's also the share me thing is like, because she's like, that was my favorite part of the chapter is she's like, I'll fight him breast to breast, top naked or something, knife point or something like that. What was it? Naked knife to knife or something. I forget what the line was. But she's like, I'll fuck anybody up. I don't care, except my cousins.
Especially Tyene too. We're close.
Well, he immediately has post-nut clarity and was like, I need to get out of here. Like, this was a bad idea. and she's like, "Are you off to see another woman?" Which is, I think, where we get all the stuff that you guys were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about the water. He's like, "Oh, we're going to the water gardens with her." She's like, "Yeah, but it'll take 4 times longer because my dad never does anything fast. Like, that's not happening anytime soon."
So just to leave too, it would take at least a fortnight just to leave.
Yeah, to get out of here.
Not even, the travel, which I'm sure that wouldn't take too long. But she's also, there was the mention of hot food made the Dornish hot-tempered and the girls wanton.
Yeah.
We had mentioned that. But don't worry, you'll be here for a little bit. Like, we can still love each other. And he's then worried about his honor and her own honor, which is a big part of kind of...
Well, he's saying that, but he's saying that he's worried about her honor. And she kind of calls him like, "Are you really, though?" Like, that's not something I feel like that's a parallel to Asha too. When Christopher Botley's like, "I've waited for you," and she's like, "I had a dude from Lys when I was like 16," and she's like, "You're not taking my maidenhood. Like, that was taken."
I think it's
years
just
ago.
It's a little inverse. I guess it's not inverse, but
well, we're getting the other viewpoint. We're getting like the lovesick puppy, and again, I don't think Asha was manipulating Christopher to like doing whatever she wanted. And again, we don't know if that's what Ariane's doing or if there is some love. But again, this seems more happy couple than not happy couple in the Asha situation. But yeah,
she's definitely not worried about her honor or her maidenhood, and her dad even knows that she had taken a bastard guy. I think she said from somewhere.
Yeah, well, you're talking about who she
Ariane,
the bastard of Night Song. Damon Sand, who was with...
Bastard of God's Grace.
Bastard of God's Grace. Bastard of God's Grace, Damon Sand. He was with Oberyn. When I looked him up in my notes, when I put him in here, we had heard him once before, and basically what I had in his note was it says, like, he probably knows that about the crowning Marcella plan. Because Oberyn had talked to Tyrion about this right before the fight with the Mountain. Like, I think when he's putting his helmet on, he's like, "When we're done with this, we're gonna crown Marcella." Like some shit, not quite that aggressive, but he was definitely hinting at it. And I have like 3 Dornishmen who happen to be with Oberyn who all probably heard this. So it's kind of interesting. She's like, "This is the guy that I lost my maiden with at 14." So the one thing I wanted to say before we get into the honor stuff is, she's like, "What happened to the one that I love that said the gallant man who said he confessed his love to me?" She's like, "I was drunk when I said that." She's like, "You had 3 cups of watered wine. Like,
you had 3 natty lights. Grow up."
Lightweight. And he's like, "I was lovesick on you," and it gets into the romantic stuff. But yeah.
All right, so then we get into the oath part, like the words that he's actually said, and she finds the loopholes pretty quickly in it with history to back, which I think is all new history to us. Kyle especially, not Nelson for sure. History that I probably didn't remember.
Well, some of it I definitely learned more going through it on the second read.
Second read? I thought this was like your 100th read.
Through this book is at least, it's not as many as the first 3, but this one's probably at least 3 or 4. Yeah, probably 4 or 5.
I thought one funny joke was too, was like, "Look, I can't." She to him was like, "Look, I can't marry you." I don't know if the loopholes in his oath come before it, but she's like, "Look, I can't marry you either. Like, I'm a princess, right? Like, I got betrothed. Like, I'll keep you as my paramour." She says,
"I don't know."
Like,
what? I don't know if that's how I took it. I almost took it as House of the Dragon, that House of the Dragon scene where I know Kyle won't get this, but Rhaenyra to Kristen Cole.
Yeah.
She's like, "Hey, I guess that's what you're saying." Where
it's
I got
the exact same fucking thing.
I guess you're right.
You don't talk about parallels. That's a little parallel.
Well, I think that's a big parallel here too, which we can get into later. That's more spoilers.
Does she talk through the loopholes of the oath at this point?
I don't know exactly, but the one thing I want to touch on, I think, is probably before whatever you're saying. She's like, "The clothes don't make the person." She's like, your white cloak doesn't make you. I'd rather be flesh and blood than silk and jewels." And he's like, "But I am my white cloak." He's like, "If we're discovered," and she's like, "Men will think you fortunate." I thought that was a good line, which again is kind of like just showing to the openness and Dorne. Like, they don't really give a fuck about like the sexuality stuff. They're like, if I'm discovered, she's like, "Men will think you fortunate because I'm hot as fuck." Like, yeah, like you'll be the talk of the town. And he's like, "They think I'm an oath breaker."
I guess this is the quote that I think, "There have always been men who found it easier to speak vows than to keep them," he admitted. Blunt was no stranger to the street of silk, and Sir Preston Greenfield used to call at a certain draper's house whenever the draper was away, but Eris would not shame his sworn brothers by speaking of their failings. And then she just kind of continues on to it, right? Like, Lucamore the Lusty is a new guy that we hear about, and the old king, the Dragon Knight, right? He had a whole wife, like, so she brought her receipts to the party too of like why she could be having fun.
We're gonna talk about that. Just give me one second. We might not have missed anything. I just want to make sure. I think the quote you said is good. "There have always been men found it easier to speak vows than to keep them, and he thinks of 2 in his own brotherhood. But
right now, current guys.
Not current, but that he's served with. Preston Greenfield died in the riot at King's Landing. The 2 in his Kingsguard, Boris Blunt goes to the brothels all the time, and Preston had this like guy he had his wife, and when the husband was out of town, he'd sneak over to the house.
The only thing he missed was Toyn found a bed with his king's mistress is the one thing that he did tell to the lady, Arianne. Yeah,
so we've heard of Toyn before, kind of. We didn't hear of him by name, which I think this is a really cool connection. So this was from Sansa 2, A Storm of Swords. And basically Sansa has just warned Marjorie that Joffrey sucks. And she's like, Marjorie's like, don't worry about it, I have Loras. And Sansa says, she is so brave, and yet her doubts still gnawed at her. Sir Loras was a great knight, all agree, but Joffrey had other Kingsguard, and gold cloaks and red cloaks besides. And when he was older, he could command armies of his own. Aegon the Unworthy had never harmed Queen Nerys, perhaps from fear of their brother, the Dragon Knight. But when another of the Kingsguard fell in love with one of his mistresses, the king had taken both their heads. So when Aegon the Unworthy, one of his Kingsguard, had fell in love with one of his mistresses, they had taken both their heads. And then what we hear about Terrence Toyn is he was found in bed with the king's mistress. It cost them both their lives, brought the downfall of his house, and the death of the noblest knight who ever lived. This is interesting because when you read it, it sounds like what Ares is saying is Terrence Toyn was one of the noblest knights who ever lived, right? The way this reads.
That's what I read it as, yeah. So you're going to spoil it for me.
No, later Arianne in this chapter when she's like, what about
Let's get there then.
Okay, so we'll go to Lucamore. We'll go next. Lucamore. You want to talk about Lucamore, Kyle? You know about him?
Lucamore the Lusty.
This is the first time we hear of him, so you can hit it.
What do I know about him? I know he had a bunch of wives and kids, and nobody really knew anything about it. So
3 wives, 16 children, kept it a secret. When it was found out, the Old King, which is the nickname for King Jaehaerys I,
sent him to the wall.
Sent him to the wall after the other members of the Kingsguard gelded him, which means
cut his nuts.
Snippy.
I think it means wiener.
Is it all? Is it everything?
It might be.
I think castrate his balls.
We've had this conversation 4 times.
Way too many times.
Gelding is a castrated animal, especially a male horse.
Okay, so it's the same thing, I guess.
I don't know.
But yeah, he's gone. Another example. And then she's like, well, what about Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight?
I don't think she goes into the details of the Dragon Knight, or if she did, I didn't take him down.
She says, you just called him the noblest knight who ever lived, but he took his queen to bed and got her with child. That's what she says about Aemon the Dragon Knight.
Was the Dragon Knight a Targaryen? He was a Targaryen?
Yeah. He was the brother. So Aegon IV was married to his sister.
The Unworthy.
Was married to his sister Nerys, and their brother Aemon. So 3 siblings, Aegon IV, the sister Nerys, and Aemon. Aegon and Nerys were married. There are rumors that Aemon, who was in the Kingsguard, loved Nerys.
Okay.
Who is the queen.
His sister?
His sister. Does this parallels to anything? Just that alone. Kingsguard who loves a sister.
Jaime.
Well, Aegon the First had 2 sisters.
That's not what I was thinking of. I was thinking more along the lines of Jaime. There's another similarity. Marjorie
Incest
and Loras.
is what he was getting at. Yeah, okay. Yeah, where they look the same and okay.
Who's the third, though? Wouldn't there be a third? Like, she was married to Garland?
Marjorie and Tommen.
It's the siblings in the Kingsguard that join the Kingsguard to stay with the sibling they loved is the idea. Loras and Marjorie, okay. Jaime and Cersei.
So it's not brother, sister, brother is what you were saying. I was just going.
No, the king is just doesn't matter. The idea is you have a bad king, and so you want the brother there. We've heard about this guy a bunch, actually, the Dragon Knight. Once Sansa says that, I think we actually get called out when Marcella gets sent away and Tommen's crying and Joffrey's like, don't be a bitch, Tommen. I think Sansa points out that the Dragon Knight cried the day his siblings got married, which I think Sansa is saying like, oh, he was so overcome
how
with
beautiful.
love.
Yeah.
But it kind of hints that. But it hints that, he might have. There's all these rumors, and what Arianne says here is, the Dragon Knight loved
buy that.
Loved the queen, and they used to fuck. And Ares like, I don't buy that. So Ares fights against it, but there are rumors that the Dragon Knight loved his sister. And Aegon IV, the Unworthy, Jeff, you know about him. Give Kyle a quick synopsis about him. Keep it short.
I don't even remember. This is Dunk and Egg stuff, right?
It is the start of Dunk and Egg stuff. Why is he unworthy?
Because he was like the 4th in line. The people in front of him just died, right?
No, he's the unworthy because he just had like a ton of mistresses.
Oh, and he started. And
he legitimized
them and started the rebellion. Okay, again, it's just too many. There's too many of them.
There's a lot of them, exactly. But this does tie in.
Because I'm pretty sure I talked about a different. What's the nickname of the one that I was saying?
Unlikely.
Unlikely. All right.
Yeah, that's what you were talking about.
That's what I was talking about.
I didn't know that one, but anyway.
Arianne has one more example, and it's her uncle, Prince Lewin.
So time out. Sorry, you're going to hate me, Jeff. But interesting here. So when talking about Terrence Toyne, he said when Terrence Toyne was found in bed with his mistress, it cost them both their lives and brought the downfall of his house and the death of the noblest knight who ever lived. Which, again, on a first read sounds like, oh, it cost him his life and the death of the noblest knight, which is Terrence Toyne. But she says, when you said the noblest knight who ever lived, you were talking about the Dragon Knight. So somehow, Terrence Toyne being found in bed with Aegon's mistress killed the Dragon Knight.
Yeah, it sounds like it shouldn't have. I don't see how that links them.
Did it like set off a chain of events or something like that?
We can talk about this in the spoiler section, and I know you're getting annoyed because you don't like the history, and this is a problem with me talking about all the history.
I don't not like the history. You're going to be mad at yourself when this is a 2-hour-long episode.
This is a slight spoiler to Kyle. This history in particular about the Dragon Knight and Terrence Toyne, this will get talked about more. And again, I think it gets talked about more because it is this parallel to Jaime, Cersei, Marjorie, Loras. And I think George, people don't like Feast of Crows, but I think one of the things that I'm realizing the more we read Feast of Crows is George is definitely layering similar themes and multiple historical references and then like current things. So that's why I want to talk about this because it will become important. So I just want some of these names to bring familiar for you guys in a few,
lay the foundation.
In a few chapters. Exactly. So yeah, I don't think there's anything more to talk about that. We'll leave some of that stuff up to question. Just wanted to point it out. To come out of this, Aerys basically says the tale of Prince Aemon's treason with Queen Nerys was only that, a tale, a lie his brother told when he wished to set his true-born son aside in favor of his bastard. Aegon was not called unworthy without cause. This little quote I just read, this is exactly what spurs the Blackflower Rebellion. And again, we don't know if this is true. We don't know if Aegon actually thought that his son, his true-born son with his wife, Daeron the Good, was... What Aerys is claiming here is the only reason that rumor is true is because the unworthy king didn't think his true-born son was true-born, thought he was a bastard to the Dragon Knight and his sister. So instead said, I'm legitimizing my bastard so that who's claimed to be my true-born son doesn't actually get the throne. He was trying to spurn his sister and
he was putting somebody in front of this other kid.
It's almost like if Robert would have realized Joffrey was a bastard and then legitimized all his bastards and Gendry becomes it's exactly what that pretty much is.
We've heard this before that like the other side of it was that he was just legitimizing them and then he passed on the sword, right? Which then spawned. So like there's multiple tales of how
I think that's a great point because Duncan, and that's the tale in Dunk and Egg, which is like they're there when this happened. They were alive through this. So I feel like that is what we should believe. This is how it's kind of been spun over the years and the rumors have evolved. So who knows? This could be true.
But also they're there, but not there. Like they weren't in the room. They weren't even in the city, right?
And
like,
Dunk is pretty naive and innocent as well.
That's why it's all great
to believe whatever.
All right. So there's one last example, Nels.
Yeah, we're good to move on. Sorry, Jeff.
So Arianne brings one that wasn't in the book that he was read of the Sworn Brothers, right? Prince Lewin, her uncle, who had a paramour the whole time. Sounds like that was just Dornish business to know about that.
Or is she just making this up?
Maybe.
Did you even think about that? Either of you guys? Like, he doesn't really question it. He's like, oh, you would know. You're the uncle.
He comes home, meets up with his paramour. Who knows?
But why would he comes home? If he had a paramour, it'd be in King's Landing. Lewin Martell's not coming home frequently. You're a Kingsguard. You don't get to visit. I don't think that's how that works.
Sometimes you get holiday.
If a royal member goes to Sunspear, I don't think that's happening often. Maybe because Rhaegar was married to Elia. So
the other thing though, like, is why would they write all these like, oh, he had a whore on 6th Street and mistress on Canal Road and like why would
Well, to Jeff's point, Arianne, the way she talks about it, she makes it sound like, oh, it's a common thing and everyone knows. They're like, oh yeah, the mistress, she's old now, but she used to be like we know who like. It sounds like it's someone that the Dornish know about, or that more than one person knows about. But
I don't know. They seem more open about it
as not being a thing. Yeah. All right, let's keep rolling. I'm gonna push this. You can stop whenever you want.
We're good.
All right, so they start talking about like, look, Your Honor, has way less to do with sleeping with me and more so to the people that you serve. Right? You had to serve Joffrey, who made you do awful things, and even Rob before. Like, he was not a good king.
And leading into that point, she said the point of Lewin was, what do you know of my uncle? And he's like, he's a great knight. And she said, yeah, a great knight with the paramour. Like, you don't think any less of him, even though he was doing what you're doing. Like, so who gives a fuck? And she's like, the thing that really fucks you is exactly what you're saying now. Is the people you've served, these monsters.
Yeah. Think about what you had to do to Sansa all those times.
Exactly. Well, she doesn't say that, but that's what he's thinking.
I know.
Yeah.
He does.
He reflects on it, but
and kind of makes us feel like he's a good guy. He says that when he did get the order, hey, you're the one that's going with Marcella. He went to actually pray and thank the warrior, like, thank you for sparing me from being the one that has to do whatever the fuck Joffrey says, because he's horrible.
Yeah.
Which again is this whole Jaime problem. That Jaime basically, we know Jaime has gone through now, and he tells Kat, it's like, oh, when the king tells you one thing and your father tells you the other, and you have sworn vows to protect, like, obey them both, and they hate each other, like, what are you supposed to do? And when one the king wants to kill the innocents, but you're sworn to, like, so you can't do everything. Is kind of what,
which pulls him into thinking, like, kind of thankfully Joff's dead. Tommen's a much nicer cat, but Marcella's really that girl, man. She's a strong girl.
Tommen doesn't seem like he's strong-willed enough. Yeah, exactly.
Tommen is better than Joffrey, and Ariane's like, but not better than Marcella.
Yeah, and we get all the strong women that he's been able to be around, right?
He's thinking of Marcella, but also Marcella's mom, Cersei, his own mother, Lady Olenna Tyrell. That's not his mother. It's just Lady Olenna Tyrell. I think he says the Queen of Thorns.
Yeah.
All the Sand Snakes, and then Arianne, most of all. Some strong women. And he's like, you're wrong. I won't say you're wrong about Tommen not being Marcella. And she's like, it's because you can't say it's wrong. And then this is where we get into the Marcella. Marcella's just would be a good ruler.
This is the meat. Now we're getting to where Arianne wanted to get to.
Yeah, and he's like, this is tradition. And she's like, what bullshit tradition that is, right? Like, why do we just follow your fucking arbitrary tradition when, like, she came first, right?
Yeah. And there's history behind this, which I know Nelson's going to be really fired up about. So come on in, historian Nelson.
Well, again, another little parallel. He says Dorne is different. What you're talking about is different. The Seven Kingdoms have never had a ruling queen. Where have we heard this before? There's never been a queen. The Ironborn have never been ruled by a woman.
There you go.
Right. So,
well, it sounds like a lot of places haven't been.
And she's like, well, there was this one guy. There was this one time. Viserys wanted to name his daughter.
So Viserys wanted Rhaenyra. Kristen changed all that up. Kristen Cole, another Kingsguard guy. The Kingmaker.
Yep. Kristen the Kingmaker. Set brother against sister, divided the Kingsguard against themselves, and began the war that was known as the Dance of the Dragons. People said different things about Kristen's reasoning. Some people said he acted out of ambition because Aegon was the more tractable. Some said he was just defending ancient Andal tradition of men come first. A few whispered that Sir Criston Cole had been Princess Rhaenyra's lover before he took the White and wanted vengeance on the woman who had spurned him. Jeff's seen House of the Dragon. Jeff knows what outcome House of the Dragon came up with. What's interesting about House of the Dragon show is they had to make a decision. Even the World Book, Fire and Blood, this is kind of for Kyle and anyone who has read Fire and Blood. The World Book doesn't really give us an answer. The World Book does this thing where it's like, we have 3 sources, and then they'll give like 3 things like this, and it's like, okay, well, we don't know why he did it, but it's like, okay, it's good to know those 3 things. And you can, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure, because you can use context clues to guess. Sometimes there's a clear one that's right, and some of them are crazy, but so that's cool. And it's cool that also House of the Dragon was basically them choosing a path through that adventure book. But yeah, so that's also to Jeff to say that whatever you saw in the show, kind of, that doesn't mean that's what happened.
I know. Trust me, we've had enough conversations. And I guess the one spoiler for me, Nelson, is that Kristen paid for it in the end.
He did pay for it.
So.
And then she cuts him off, and he's like, but maybe the 7 sent you to make up for where they sent one white knight to make up for the other one where another white knight fucked up.
Yep.
He's like, do you know why he's taking Marcella to the Water Gardens? Like, to keep her safe. And he's like, well, to keep her away from those who would crown her. Not safe, but to keep her from becoming queen.
Now. We don't want to kill her. We want to crown her.
It's actually worse, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's like we're trying to raise her up to this super powerful position, and like he's preventing that. So essentially, he's actually hurting her. He is the one that is hurting her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dorne, she mentions my dad, Doran's scared to do it he don't want that smoke with King's Landing.
Yeah. He's like, are you gonna you said you love Marcella like a daughter, you gonna let her rot away in a prison? He's like, the water gardens are supposed to be beautiful. Like, they're definitely not a prison. He's like,
it's sandals.
It's like, you won't be able to leave though. It's sandals. So yeah, but once you get there, you won't be able to leave. So it's pretty much a prison.
Especially because Area Hotah's there with his big ass axe.
Exactly. So he's like, what would you have me do then? What would you want from me? And she says, only what you swore to do. Defend Marcella and defend Marcella's rights, which means you got to put a crown on her head. And he's like, I swore an oath. And she's like, yeah, but you swore your oath to Joffrey.
So he's just finding loopholes left and right.
This probably is a good loophole, though. Like, there probably is a thing where when Joffrey died, they probably did have like some type of ceremony where all the Kingsguard have to
re-say their
I'm guessing
it's probably part of the coronation, you would think, right? Like, all right, we got a new king up here. You guys start lining up and give your kneel. Like, maybe they don't have to say them, but they have to like re-kneel type of thing.
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever heard of this, but I would guess so. So I think this might actually be a good. You're right, it's a loophole, but I think it might be a valid.
You would
loophole.
think someone has tried to use said loophole before in the history of this all.
It only kind of works because he wasn't there. But you're right. I guess this probably would have happened before where Kingsguard was away.
Well, and the other side of it is like they already fucked tradition as it is, right? Like they already dismissed Selmy. Like this is a lifetime position,
which
and
comes
they pretty much So like, why are you following tradition when they're not even following tradition? Like,
yeah, it becomes a big point to Ariane's argument is that like shit change. Like kings have the power to change things, and that's why when we get Marcella to the deal, she's going to change the rules for you and we can love each other.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's Kyle. What you said was true, but I don't think your reasoning for why that was said was true. I think what Jeff said is more accurate. It's like, hey, they can. It's not that they're not beholding to customs. It's that hey, when you're king, you make the rules. You don't have to behold to any rules. That's Joffrey was able to dismiss Barristan not because he was breaking the rules, but because he's the king and gets to write the rules. Which is almost saying like, leading into the next conversation, which is like, let's crown Marcella and ride this train. They don't talk about it right away, but it's like, let's crown Marcella, then we can do what we want. We can break the rules, and then you can be a Kingsguard and marry me together. And again, she doesn't talk about that right now. That's kind of what she's alluding to is whoever the king is can rewrite the rules.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, I think it's like, what tradition's only as good as the king, right? Like, so I like if you make her the king, then the new tradition's the new tradition, or the queen rather. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I think it's the same thing where it's like there's this claim of tradition, and that's like they're the only real answer as to why, right? Like that's the only answer they can give as to why not to give it to Marcella. Do you have an answer?
I thought your point was more along the lines of they're breaking the rules, so we can like they're doing whatever the fuck they want. We can do whatever the fuck they want, and where I think she's more saying they're in charge, so they can do whatever we want. So if we make Marcella in charge, then we can do whatever we want. Like,
I think we're saying the same thing, though. Like it's like tradition doesn't matter if you're in power. Like
yeah.
Like which is bullshit, but at the same not bullshit, but that's not what I'm trying to say. I guess what I'm trying to say is like is this whole like why do you have a reason that Marcella can't be in charge? That isn't tradition.
Well, the reason is that's not the law.
Tradition.
Well, and law. What's interesting is like Jeff and I have had this argument in many chapters. I think probably going back to the first Tyrion chapter where Oberyn mentioning crowning Marcella. And I'm like, because she's in Dorne, Dornish law applies.
Yeah, we've talked about Dornish law.
We've had this argument so much.
An Italian person like in America should follow Italian law, like or like.
No, I'm right. Under that circumstances, when an Italian person's in America, they follow American law, which is exactly what I'm saying. The place where you're in matters. No. Again, we don't have to. We've had this argument. Go back to the chapter we talked about this last time. If you want to hear
that's like saying an American goes. Hold on, I'll change my American goes to any other country, gets voted to be their president, and then you're saying like, oh. They're an American that was voted president. They should be the president of the United States.
It's more like a law in one place affecting governance in another place, which is different than just like abiding by the laws. You're right. It's more complicated than that. But my point is like, I think it's really weird and probably a point to you, Jeff, that you're right. I think it's weird as fuck that Ariane does not bring this up at all.
Because it's a stupid argument. You're the only one that thinks that this stupid argument holds weight.
So what's Ariane's argument here? You really like Marcella and she's better?
No. I think this is her argument. This is her argument. She's better. You know she's better. So let's just do it. Like, we don't care. In Dorne, that doesn't happen.
So break the law?
No, we're not going to break it. We're going to rewrite it. That's exactly what you've just been saying for the last 5 minutes.
Once we win, we'll rewrite it so that we were never wrong.
It doesn't matter. You don't even have to win yet, right? Like,
but you're in the wrong until you win.
We wrote the Declaration of Independence before we won the war.
Is that true? I don't know. I believe you.
But is that law?
No, it was our Declaration of Independence.
Once we won the war, it became law, I would say.
I don't think there's any laws in that.
I'd have to check the timeline. Timeline probably doesn't matter there either. That's a joke. That's a joke. But that's what I think. That's what she's saying. Is like, we're going to rewrite. Once we do this thing, we can win the war. Then we can rewrite. We'll rewrite the law.
I don't know though. I think she is, because like she brought up all this other stuff of like, you know, I should be next in line here, and like she made a lot of points about women being in power in Dorne, right? So like I think Nelson has a point that like that is kind of her underlying kind of main.
I think what you're getting into is a little bit different of a story of like, she is in line and she thinks she's about to get overstepped, which kind of changes her mindset on some things.
Yeah,
like,
agreed.
She's not the heir right now. She is there.
And although I still think the only real ground anyone who's trying to crown Myrcella has to stand on is to claim that because she's in Dorne, Dornish law applies. But
I don't think they matter. It doesn't matter.
We know you don't think that, and we know you don't think that. Hold on, I'm about to agree with you.
It goes back to your favorite quote of this book, where does power lie? Power lies with.
If you let me finish the sentence, I'd agree with you.
Just agree with your own line. This is episode 250. Even though I think the only grounds anyone has to stand on is to claim that, Arya never once mentions that in this chapter. She never once tries to use that as an argument to persuade Aerys, and she is throwing everything at this guy. She's giving him the doe eyes, giving him the nipple. At one point, she's like literally like nipple rubbing in front of him. Like, oh, don't you want a nipple? Exactly. So like, she's throwing everything, and she never uses that argument because it's just a stupid argument. It's a stupid argument for a member of King's Landing who's never ever thought about following.
But
this line
at the same
of
time, Jeff, she said you swore an oath to Joffrey and not to Tommen, which is like another kind of ridiculous like.
Well, it's a loophole. I don't think it's crazy.
But it's kind of a valid loophole because there probably is an actual ceremony that when a new king is like comes in, that
you probably just swear to the king.
You don't think that when Joffrey was crowned over Robert, all the Kingsguard came in and re-kneeled to him?
No.
I think that's we don't know, but I think it's a very high possibility. And I think that's the loophole area. And I agree with you that in principle, that's not the point of the Kingsguard. Mm-hmm. But that's the loophole. And that's why Jeff's calling it a loophole. And I agree. That's what she's going on.
All our army's generals don't have to fucking go back in and become generalized. I don't know what you call that. Every time we have a new president.
That makes sense.
You just maintain.
I do agree to that too.
The other problem I have with her argument there is like, she's like, you swore to Myrcella, not to Tommen. Did he swear anything extra to Myrcella over Tommen? Because if you're swearing to Joffrey, first of all, you're saying, hey, I'm going to protect the king and the royal family. So like,
yeah.
Myrcella and Tommen are equally parts of the royal family. So why is his?
I think she just filled in her loophole with a knot and got stuck.
I think there's a chance he might have had to swear an extra vow to Marjorie before he was sent to Dorne. But again, we don't. Myrcella, Jesus Christ, thank you. But again, we don't know.
Yeah. Well, she continues to hit on why Myrcella is going to be better than Tommen anyway, right?
In truth, Myrcella was braver, brighter, more confident, had better courtesies than Tommen, and nothing ever daunted her. Not even Joffrey daunted her.
Yeah. Let Tommen's ass be Lord. You know, he could take over Castle Rock. Let's get Myrcella on the throne.
Yep.
I mean, to be fair, we never really met Myrcella. Like, she was not really around much.
Yeah.
Like,
and she was,
even Tommen wasn't. And I mean, now we've seen him a little bit, but still, they're not main characters. So we don't really know most of their. I mean, we know Tommen's a little kid, like writing his name in crayon on shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, scribbling his signature. Yeah.
So her next ploy is to act afraid.
Exactly. I'm scared. I need you to defend me. It's like, you have your father's knights to defend you.
Can't trust them.
They're the ones that locked up all my cousins. Don't you remember?
The more we reread this, the more I'm like, yeah, she's playing him.
Sass.
Yeah.
Again, I think it could go both ways. I think it's very unlikely that they met by happenstance. It just seems too much coincidence that he's the key to the door.
Well, wouldn't have been happenstance. They would have been eating lunch at the same table every day.
I think there was some planning on her part, at least in the meeting. That doesn't mean feelings didn't develop, but I think it just seems too coincidental.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with it. It's very coincidental, but they would have been around each other. It's not like she went out of her way to like see him. But
that's what I don't agree with, especially because she knows
who
could I make friend. I want to crown Marcella. Who could I make friends with? Who could I make friends with here that will make that happen? Who can I use these boobies on?
I mean, again, but she didn't have to go out of her way to do that. They saw each other every day.
Yeah, but all the Lannister guardsmen are probably drooling over her too.
That's like just being lucky that you got class with that one girl that you really liked. You got to see her every day. Well, you just happened to be in the same class with her.
But all the other guys got to be in class with her too. So if she wants,
maybe the teacher assigned seats. Guess what? Hey, assigned teacher seats got right next to her. Bam, a little group project.
We don't know. Again, I think it's great when we argue about the stuff like this because it actually makes it very clear to Kyle that we don't fucking know the actual truth of this.
I would say the other side of it, though, is like she was also had control of the assigned teacher seats, Jeff.
She is the teacher.
Yeah, so I don't know.
And the classmate.
We kind of get into that. She says that the only thing I was in charge of, she's like, I wasn't given any power.
Parties.
The only thing I was in charge was with the
I was
feasts and frolics. So I did have the seating chart for exactly. So
yeah. So she doesn't want to end up like her cousins. Even the little ones got locked up. But her and Tyene, they're close. They're basically sisters. She knows everything that I'm about. Me and Tyene are on the same page. She was at the last meeting. Tyene was the last meeting, one, which is when Doran was like, "All right, we gotta lock these bitches up."
The cute and innocent one who he was like afraid was like poisoning him when she was like touching his hands and shit. Yeah, that was Tyene.
Yeah. All right.
And Aerys like, your father wouldn't imprison you, and he's like, if he imprisoned my cousins, like I'm no different than them. Like we're best friends. Like
if he's afraid, he's gonna. You never know what he'll do.
Exactly. Back to the wall. Plus, I was always a disappointment to him.
Because she was a girl.
He tried to marry me to all these old guys.
Or just as a girl.
She's assuming as a girl. I don't think that's ever made clear through anything she says, but he seems to treat her.
Not because she's a girl, but how she's... Like, how are you taking that? Like, just because she's a girl? Or because the way she acted as a daughter? Like she kind of was out running around.
I think it does seem like Doran didn't favor her from what she says. He tried to marry me to these old guys. I think the reasoning is up for question. She definitely thinks it's a sexist reasoning, but I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Let me just read her words. I have been disappointing him since I first arrived in this world without a cock. So, having a daughter...
She thinks it's sexist.
Yeah.
I think through context clues, it does seem like he is slighting her slightly, but I don't think it's clear that that's necessarily his reason. That's what she thinks is the reason.
And then he's just trying to marry her off to anybody that would take her.
Yeah, all these old men. And she's like, he never commanded me, but the offers, like the guys were so old and toothless, like the offers tell you how much he regards me.
And we mentioned she wasn't really doing shit, which kind of gets her into like, look, my father, he had no plans on me staying in the heir. I found a letter in his study one night writing to her other brother. This is other brother. We haven't even heard of this brother.
Have we heard of him? I don't know. We might have heard him once or twice. Let me see.
Well, she mentions brother, and he goes right to Trystane, right? But she's talking about...
Quentyn was mentioned one time. Tyrion 3, Storm of Swords, small council meeting with lots of people. Tyrion and Cersei marriages are discussed. Tywin tells Cersei she is to marry Willis Tyrell. Quentyn is mentioned as another option. So Quentyn was a potential Cersei match.
Okay, so Quentyn was mentioned, but Kyle definitely hadn't put two and two together.
Yeah, that was the only time he was mentioned.
Yeah, well, it just said Quentyn, right? Like it didn't even say who he was.
Probably say Quentyn Martell, but yeah, unclear who he was.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you had a direct quote you were reading.
No, that was my notes. They're throwing out like Theon and like they're throwing out those types of people. So yeah, that's how. Yeah. So one of you guys read this quote, the letter she found.
I've known the truth since I was 4 and 10, since the day that I went to my father's solar to give him a goodnight kiss and found him gone. My mother had sent for him, I learned later. He'd left a candle burning. When I went to blow it out, I found a letter lying incomplete beside it. A letter to my brother Quentyn, off at Ironwood. My father told Quentyn that he must do all that his maester and his master at arms required of him. Because one day you will sit where I sit and rule all Dorne, and a ruler must be of strong mind and body. A tear crept down Ariane's soft cheek. My father's words, written in his own hand, they burned themselves into my memory. I cried myself to sleep that night and many nights thereafter.
Yep.
So at the very least, she never actually heard this from him, but she believes that she read a letter that he wrote that insinuated that he would be taking over power.
One day you will sit where I sit and rule off Doran.
Yeah, I mean, it's not spelled out.
It's a very strong insinuation.
You're right, but it's not directly spelled out by any means. I would also say we don't know that he wrote it, right? Like, she says it's in his own hand. She's also been kind of manipulating this dude.
Does this note actually exist?
Yeah.
Good point.
So
yeah,
that's part of it.
Good. I didn't even think of that. It could be fake news.
Yeah,
I think that's a good point. Along the other lines is the whole he wrote it thing. I don't know about. I think it's clear he wrote it.
No. I think it's weak.
The he sent it is different though. This is on his table.
Yeah, but I mean, to still write
yet.
it though, like, is some.
Yeah, it tells you you're thinking about something.
But I mean, at the same time, like, we skimmed over it where, like, you talked about her being in charge of parties, but like he left his cousin in charge of Castellan, a blind dude in charge of Sentinel, his bailiffs collecting duty. Like, I mean, it's at least per what she's telling him, he has slighted her already.
Yeah, I mean, and just the marriage offers, old guys and stuff. Exactly. Yeah, there seems to be truth in that. Exactly.
Yeah,
from what she's telling him. Yep.
So they move on. He's like, well, Ares thinks he hasn't met Quentin yet. He's thinking to himself, like, what I know of him is he was sent off to Ironwood, which is actually a great call by Kyle. He hit that on his first try on that read of that quote.
I'm on Euronwood.
Yornwood is how I always said it, but all the fans say Ironwood, and that's how you're supposed. I think that's how you're supposed to say it.
Euronwood.
That's how I always said it.
Well, I mean, it's like the Erie. I don't know.
It starts with a Y.
Ironwood.
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, like, it was Ronwood. What would you put in front of it to make it a word? Ironwood.
Euronwood.
That's where I was at.
That's what most people say, so it's a great call by you. But
I think there's a tree, the Ironwood tree, as well. So
I don't know. I was Euronwood till right now.
It's a real tree, Nelson. Don't look up to the sky like you're trying to think of it in Game of Thrones.
No, that's 100% is a Game of Thrones tree. Is the Ironwood tree?
Well, it's a real tree.
You know the Telltale video game company?
Yeah.
They made a Telltale Game of Thrones series, and you play as the Forrester family, which is a family in the north, which is known for their ironwood forests.
Okay.
Which is always confused me when I think of this house Ironwood.
Sounds like it actually exists, though. So
it does exist. So, but moving on, what Ares knows of Quentin, he's been fostered with this guy. They're supposed to be in the Boneway. We heard in the area chapter the reason there's people in the Boneway is because they're sending Oberyn's body back, and they're sending a big group of Dornishmen to basically meet his body on the edge of the Dornish border, and Quentin's with them. And Ariane's like, yeah, well, that's what you think, but that ain't true. That's what my dad wants everyone to think, but really,
he's across the narrow sea,
pretending to be a merchant. And she's like, why? And he's like, well, how the fuck
why
would I
do
know?
you
There's probably
think?
a million reasons why. And she's like, well, there's only one reason. The Golden Company has broken their contract with Mir. And Ares like, well, Salesforce break contracts all the time. It's like, who gives a fuck?
Do we know who the Golden? Did we know this before? Like, this was like I started reading this, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Okay,
This
all
is
right.
first Golden Company mention?
First Golden Company mentioned.
No way. With all the Danny talk with Self-Swords over there, we haven't even mentioned the Golden Company yet.
Jeff, you're borderline spoilering by how much you're saying right now, but I will check. But they were not. In my
Good thing
notes.
I'm dumb because I didn't get it, so we're good.
It just seems like Jeff's alluding to them being important.
They seem important just from what Ariane just said here, Nelson.
Dude,
so.
with all the time that we've spent in Essos, we're not going to talk about.
This is their first mention.
There's no way. Your notes stink.
I don't know.
Not my notes. My notes had it. This is the first mention.
No.
My notes had it as the first mention. I just checked the website where you can search all the books, and
I'll call George.
Golden Company has broken their contract with Mir. Arya says sell swords, break contracts. All.
Arya? You said Arya. Ares.
I thought it meant Ares.
Something here has been named before. Bitter Steel.
We've heard of Bitter Steel, but I don't know what Bitter Steel is. That was...
Yeah, you're right there. We haven't heard of the Golden Company. We have definitely heard of Bitter Steel. So they broke their contract, and he's like, whatever, they do that all the time. She's like, not the Golden Company. Their motto is, our word is good as gold. And she's like, it's been that since the days of Bitter Steel. Bitter Steel is one of the great bastards, which is what they call the bastards born to Aegon IV, Aegon the Unworthy, when we were talking about him earlier. His siblings have some shit going on. Now we're talking about his kids, his bastards. The great ones are the ones that were born to noble women. Betha Blackwood and Bethany Bracken.
It's not just the whore kids, right?
Not just the whore kids. The whore kids are a lower level kind of.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The great ones are the ones that were born to noble,
Exactly.
like lords and whatever. Like he was, yeah.
Yep. The two big ones we know of are Bloodraven, who is the hand that is like sorcery and magic-y that they're talking about in the last Dunk and Egg book. And the other one is Daemon Blackfire, which is the one who had Blackfire and becomes the Black Dragon, right? He's the leader. Bittersteel is the brother, and he is like Daemon Blackfire's number one supporter. So he is like basically the top general.
We read about this in Dunk and Egg.
The most recent Dunk and Egg. Yes.
Okay.
We probably didn't hear much, but we heard a mention.
This is me putting it together.
I think the guy at the tower gives us like a history of these.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Bittersteel did some badass shit. Probably.
Yeah, I remember. I do remember this because I now that you say that, I thought Bittersteel was a place or something. I'm just so confused. But okay.
No. Yeah.
It's a person. Yeah.
So he apparently founded a sellsword company full of exiles. Right, that's what they say. A brotherhood of exiles and the sons of exiles united by the dream of Bittersteel. It's home they want as much as gold. Lord Ironwood knows that as well as I do. His forebears rode with Bittersteel during 3 of the Blackfire rebellions. 3 of the Blackfire rebellions? We've only seen 1 Blackfire rebellion. That's weird.
The fuck?
More Blackfire rebellions to come. Crazy.
Yeah, I skipped that. I missed that part. I didn't realize that.
I think one of the cooler parts of history now is we get into... Have you ever seen the sigil of House Tolland of Ghost Hill?
Dragon eating its tail. A dragon is time, which is another parallel or a callback. Jeff and I we had at least sometimes I don't know if it's a spoiler section conversation or not. Me and you, Jeff, definitely had a conversation about history repeating itself.
Mm-hmm.
This was because Roderick, when he was talking to Asha, Roderick the Reader, said something about time is a wheel, time is a circle.
That's why he's reading stuff, right? Like, yeah, it's probably
exactly. Yeah, that's why you got to know history. Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. I definitely mentioned it I definitely mentioned that quote at some point. But yeah, so it's the same type of thing where it's like time is a wheel. What happened once is going to happen again. And Anders Ironwood is going to be the new Christian Cole. He's going to name a usurper basically to the crown. Quentin right? Usurping me. Exactly.
And he's going to use Quentin essentially to leverage himself into power, right? That was Kristen Cole's whole thing, right? Like he saw that the one guy was easier, more tractable, he said, more kind of leadable than the other.
One of the rumors.
Yeah,
of it.
exactly.
Yeah.
The other rumor was, or he just liked the Andal tradition of a man's in charge of a woman. So,
or the woman didn't want to be with him.
Oh, and that's what he says here. And this guy doesn't like me. He's probably whispering to my brother that he should rule. It's not right for men to kneel to women, and that me especially is unfit to rule because I'm so wild and wanton or whatever.
The willful one. So yeah, like she just does whatever she wants. Yep.
And I have so your 2 princesses share common cause to the end of the chapter as a quote.
So your 2 princesses share a common cause, sir. They share as will a knight who claims to love them both, but will not fight for them.
I will.
Sir Ares sank to one knee.
Marcella is the elder, and the better suited to the crown. Who will defend her rights if not her Kingsguard? My sword, my life, my honor, all belongs to her, and to you, my heart's delight. I swear, no man will steal your birthright. Whilst I still have the strength to lift the sword, I'm yours. What would you have of me?
Ah.
She knelt to kiss his lips.
Ah, my love, my true love, my sweet love, and forever. But first...
Ask, and it is yours.
Marcella.
Oh, dun dun dun.
Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, the more I read this, like it just seems like she's playing him. I don't know.
Yeah.
The more I read it, it's like she's obviously got her own motives here. Like I don't know. And like, dude, completely bought it, right?
Love is her motives.
I think she lays it on pretty heavy.
Well, she like you even said it yourself. She like went through all these like emotions, and it just seems very convenient.
She took every angle at his ass.
I don't want to like. I see you kind of giving a look, Nelson. I don't want to make you think that like you gave a spoiler or anything, because it does, to me at least, the reading it alone just a second time kind of like was like, oh yeah, she is kind of like changing how things, like she's willing to say whatever needs to be said and do whatever needs to be done right here to kind of get some points across. And she does mention a couple things in there that kind of even further that, where she's like, you know, my cousins and I are inseparable and best friends, and like, what were her cousins trying to do, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
So, like there's probably a couple more in there. So that's where I'm at with this chapter. Is I don't think she has ill will for Ares. I don't think she is completely 100% only using him, but I don't think it's nearly as true love as she's laying it on.
Gotcha. What's next in Dorn?
I don't know, man, because like he is completely lost now. I bet he does. I kind of want to see him fight Ario, I guess, but I feel like we need to see that happen. But I have no idea, man. Like he is Dornish now. It feels like almost.
He's from the Reach. Can't.
I know, man, but like he doesn't. He's completely like just gone, right? Like I don't think he's thinking about any of that anymore.
I mean, Marcella. Jesus Christ, Ariane would make me become Dornish too. Inject that right in my blood.
It's amazing that you say these things off of just reading their description. You're the type of people that fall in love through chat rooms.
Also, Dornish is a little spicy food. I like that. I don't like the what. I mean, I'd like the want women, but they don't like me. But yeah, I feel like I'd fit okay in Dorne. I could get it done.
Wrap it up.
We'll see the rest of you guys in the spoiler section. We'll see Kyle in the next one. For Kyle, what is it? It's Brienne 3?
Something like that, yeah.
Oh. Brienne on the road, maybe with Pod.
Maybe with Pod.
We'll see you guys. We got off track so bad. It's such a bad one. We'll see you guys in the next one. We'll see Kyle in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Later, nerds.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! Bye, Kyle. Thanks for hanging out with us. See you on the next time for Brienne 3. Nelson, what are your hot takes?
Got a few sweets to start out with.
There's a big sweet at the end, which I think gets us to the whole question was like, is she actually loving him or not? I think probably first time I was more so she loved him camp. This time I think she's using the fuck out of him.
So the thing that Kyle doesn't know that we know, that you know, but you have probably forgot the details. We get Ariane perspectives, right? We get a lot of POVs from her.
Yeah, I remember them playing Savas and shit like that. Like, or she gets locked up, right?
She gets locked up, and he gives her a Savas table. And at one point, he's like, "Did you play?" He's like, "Who are I going to play with?" And he's like, "You should have played with yourself because it's a good representation, basically, of the Game of Thrones. Like, you learn how to try and understand what other people are doing."
That's weird, though. I just got a chessboard. Like a really nice marble chessboard, kind of Christmas gifty, I guess, kind of hand me down. Like, I'm not playing chess by myself. I'm not spinning the board around. And
well, it also takes like a part away from it, where it's like, part of chess is like what
you're throwing. You're throwing the game.
It's like, what is that guy gonna do next? Like, well, you know what that guy's gonna do next. That guy's you. So, yeah, I agree. It kind of takes part of it out, but I think you maybe learn. When there's nothing else to do, you could probably learn something.
You can learn, like, all right, if I do this, they do that. Like, if you're really trying to practice said game.
Or it's almost like a thing where it's like if you make a move and then walk away for an hour, and then you sat down from the other perspective and you kind of like forgot about what you were doing before. You're like, well, how would I
I mean, if you're locked in a room, you got to find something to do.
But I agree with you. That's the Savas stuff. On the back to the sweet stuff, I agree. There's one at the end.
She calls him my sweet love.
It's in the quote we read. Yep. She knelt to kiss his lips. All my love, my true love, my sweet love, and forever. But first, Marcella.
So I'll just say one more thing because we just reread that quote. All is kind of weirdly italicized. My love, my true love, and my sweet love. Right. So maybe there is a piece of her. You know, she's calling him my love and like my true love. Like, I really do love you. But I got to give you kind of this fake love, too, because I need you to be this cog of the wheel.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good point, a good use of sweet here. I think this is one of the ones where it does fit. And earlier, the other one I had was she says, my knight, my white knight, my sweet white knight. So it's kind of like along the same lines where she builds up and at the end it's sweet. So and from her perspective, there are some feelings there. She doesn't not care about Ares. Like she feels really bad after he dies and stuff, but I don't think she ever was going to marry him, or like maybe if things really went to plan, cause like why not at that point? You know what I mean? But like Yeah, it's very unlikely that she is really head over heels in love with him, and everything she's saying in this chapter is completely genuine. There's definitely some manipulation here. I think.
Should we just lay out Ares real quick? So they try to escape with Marcella.
Well, so this is his one and only chapter. Next chapter is Ariane chapter. I think it's his last chapter.
It's his last chapter. They escape with Marcella.
Yep.
Hota chases them down, chops off Bull's head.
Not really chases them down. So they head out over the desert. They cross a section of desert and get to the Green Blood, which is this river that runs through Dorne. So Nymeria, when she came over from Essos with all her people, they were from this river Royne. So they were like river people. So when they got to Dorne, they're like, we need a river. That's what we do. We're river people. So they found this and they call it the Green Blood, which is like, and they're orphans of the Green Blood because the Royne, the river Royne, was called Mother Royne. So they're orphans of the Green Blood. Not that they don't have parents, or an orphan of the Green Blood just means they're a river person they make their living off this river or whatever. So they meet up with Marcella in the desert near Sunspear. I think they cross over, or maybe it's near the Water Gardens. They cross over a pretty big section of desert, or a decent section of desert, and they get to the Green Blood. And there's a boat that's waiting for them, and they're about to go get on the boat. And Ario is waiting there with a bunch of guards. So it's not that he chases him down; it's that he knew, and he was there. He was like one step ahead, kind of.
Did he know, or was he just ready for them to leave type of thing?
He knows, and there's this whole thing of Ariane's like, how did you know? And Ario says, someone told. Someone always tells.
Ooh.
And there's like 9 people that we learn about in the next Aria chapter who are all like in this, right? Including Darkstar, Ares.
Yeah, the Darkstar stuff. I know he ends up like running away at the end of.
Well, Marcella gets cut and he leaves in the theater.
Yeah, I don't remember all those details.
Yeah, so we'll learn about that in the next Ariane chapter.
But it doesn't go well for your boy Eris in the next one.
Yep. Next thing I had Terrence Toyne. And we talked about some of this history. The interesting thing that I kind of posed to Kyle is what does Ares say? He says Terrence Toyne
killed the most noblest knight.
Yep. He was found in bed with the king's mistress, and it cost them both their lives, Terrence Toyne and the mistress, and brought the downfall of his house and the death of the noblest knight who ever lived. But the noblest knight who ever lived is
Arthur Dane,
the Dragon Knight, Aemon the Dragon Knight.
I thought you were asking my opinion.
No, that's who he's referencing. So the way that Terrence Toyne being found in bed with the king's mistress led to the Dragon Knight's death is, like I said, Aegon IV and the Dragon Knight are brothers.
Yep.
And Dragon Knight's in the Kingsguard, so is Terrence Toyne. Terrence Toyne is found in bed with Bethany Bracken.
Okay.
It cost them both their lives. I think he was actually like ripped apart piece by piece.
All right, so map it out how it gets to the Dragon Knight.
So somehow Terrence Toyne, after this was found out, his real brothers, act like Toyne brothers, not White brothers, have a plan to like kill Aegon. The Dragon Knight stops them, kills them, but dies in the process.
Yeah.
They all die, and that's how it led to the death of the noblest knight being the Dragon Knight.
But the noblest knight was sneaking around with the queen the whole time?
Potentially, sweet. We don't know. I think most likely, again, it's one of the things that even if you've read all the history books and everything, it's up in the air. I think probably most likely no. It was more of a Loras Marjorie thing where it wasn't a love romantic. It was more of a love brother sister. Not saying the Dragon Knight's gay, but it was more of that. But we don't know. It's one of the things where I think getting a show about this time period wouldn't be good because there's lots of dragons and battles. It would be good because there's lots of people sleeping with each other's wives, which I think honestly is what fans like more than dragon battles.
Yeah, the drama more so than.
Yeah, exactly. It's not great when you're just reading names and stuff like off paper like this, especially when it's like in
it's
reference to
great when there's drama.
But,
like Jon Snow just slept with his aunt, and then they also get to both go ride a dragon.
But again, like imagine we're watching a show where like 3 siblings who we all know and kind of like are king, queen, and Kingsguard, but the king and Kingsguard are fucking, and the king is actually fucking all these other. Like it could be. I could see them doing a show like that, but again, we're kind of going down a rabbit hole. Last thing I had is Doran. Ariane's pissed that she's like he never thought well of me. He's trying to marry me to old men.
It's the note. Who wrote the note?
Well, and the note, but Doran.
Jersey Shore season 2.
It's all related. Who wrote the note, and why is Doran trying to marry Ariane to all these old toothless graybeards?
She's saving him for
Rhaegar. Viserys.
Exactly. That's actually the right answer. Yes. She, by not commanding her, but giving bad options, he knew she would say no. What he tells her later is, I couldn't be seen to not be making any offers, or that would be suspicious. So I had to make some offers, but I had to pick people that I knew you would say no to.
He explains this to her?
Yeah. When she calls him out, when basically she says, I saw your
She's
letter.
like, I read the note.
Yeah. And he's like, you don't understand. Here's what actually was happening. You're going to be queen of everything. You're just jumping a few a few steps here. Which again, I think is interesting when we know the spoiler section, the spoilers. He's basically saying you're going to be queen of everything. Quentin he'll be a high lord, but he'll be the lord of Dorne. When what Ariette is trying to convince Aerys of this chapter is, we're going to make Myrcella queen of everything.
So Tommen, I can be queen of Dorne.
Well, Tommen will still be a high lord. She says this. Tommen will be lord of Storm's End, and he'll get Castle Rock one day. He'll be one of the highest lords in the realm.
Yeah.
But Myrcella will be queen. And that's kind of what Doran's doing with his own children. It's like, you're going to be queen, and then he'll be a high lord. And that's what she's saying. Myrcella will be queen.
She's thinking it's going to be opposite, right?
You're right. She's arguing Myrcella to get her own claim in Doran secure, because I'm in charge if Myrcella's my friend and she's the queen of everything. Exactly.
She ain't worried about Tommen falling on the sword for her.
The other thing that's interesting is she's kind of on the right path with the Golden Company and Quentin. She's like, Quentin's going overseas. Quentin is going overseas. He's not going over to get the Golden Company to him. He's not trying to use the Golden Company to take your throne. He's trying to go to Dany. The Golden Company are going to Fagon. They might end up being on the same team, but like the Golden Company ending their contract is a really big thing for Dance of Dragons. Not really for, I don't think much for the rest of this book, but it's a big thing for the Dance of Dragon. And so is the Quentin. I mean, Quentin's a POV character. He's like 5 chapters in Dance of Dragons. So
till his ass goes burned.
Maybe he doesn't get 5, maybe like 2 or 3, but exactly. I think it's cool that she is kind of late. Like, again, Feast of Crows. I agree with you.
She's picking up on some things, but she's not connecting the dots in the right way.
Yeah, and it's really cool that I agree with it. Like, this chapter isn't that fun to read, I think, for a first reader, or maybe even a second.
I'm enjoying this, a couple of these, because I'm picking up on the innuendos of it all.
It's just weird that like what I'm really liking about Feast of Crows so far is the stuff that I know you have to have a wiki in front of you to be getting, right? Like the Terrence Toyne thing. Like I pulled that quote from Sansa 2, Storm of Swords. Like that was really cool to connect that line where she never says Terrence Toyne. She just says, "Oh, you think you're safe because of Loras? Well, there was another king or a queen who had her brother in the Kingsguard, and he died."
That's something I never would have found.
But I think that's kind of the really cool stuff in this book is you realize that that's from Sansa 2. That's from 1,000 pages ago. And George never even mentioned Terrence Toyne by name. This is the first time Terrence Toyne's been mentioned by name, but he was mentioned ambiguously 1,000 pages ago, and it makes sense now. Like that's the kind of stuff that when I read it, I'm like,
it gets you geeked up.
How the fuck did he do that? Exactly. But like on a first read, you would never realize that. So I agree that I'm getting a little geeked up about some of the stuff. But I think that's why. And that's why
what makes you, Nelson.
Well, I also think that's why George is kind of weird. And he said, I've written these books. I write these books to be reread. And it's like Feast of Crows is not good on a first read.
I mean, you could reread this a million times and not link Terrence Toyne to that chapter.
That's what I'm saying. You have to almost have like a wiki in front of you. That's and the only reason I had Terrence Toyne ever in the notes before is because when I read that quote the first time, I Googled.
You were wondering who she was talking about.
Exactly. And I Googled it, and then I made a Terrence Toyne note and linked it to that Sansa 2 chapter. So it showed up now. But like, that's crazy that like, I don't know. That's a good episode that like how George has to be the from Always Sunny, the Charlie with a cigarette in his mouth and the strings all over the place. Like that, I don't know. He said it seems like he doesn't, but it has to be at some point. But
it has to be. There's a crazy room somewhere.
We went too long in the spoiler section. That's all I had for the, or we went too long in the non-spoiler. Non-spoiler. That's all I had for the spoilers.
Thanks for listening to us.
See you guys the next one for Brienne 3, Dunkin' Egg version, Brienne and Pod.
Bye.
Bye-bye.